Good morning and welcome to the show. This morning the topic is the historical black colleges, and we have to talk about that topic a very distinguished person from the community as well as from one of our area universities, Dr. HPonder, who is the president of Fisk University. And let me welcome you to the show this morning, Dr. Ponder.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Ponder, this is the third of three shows that we're doing dealing with the Afro-American History Month. And what we'd like to do this morning is to talk about historical black colleges. And I think that there's no person who is better qualified to talk about historical black colleges than yourself, because it is your institution that is generally recognized as one of the first historical black colleges. And so why don't you give us as much information as you'd like to give us this morning concerning the history of historical black colleges?
Well, I think one of the things that the public seem not to be aware of is that probably one of the miracles of this country has been the historically black colleges and what they have been able to do for the country. Now let's back up just a little bit. When we were about 1920, not very many of our people were literate, and then our colleges got started, and finally now we have a very literate population. But let's move on back further. During times of slavery, it was against the law to teach black people to read or write. And as a matter of fact, the penalty for teaching a person to read or write was even greater than murdering someone. If you taught a person to read or write, they would kill you, or cut your hand off, or put your eyes out, or cut your tongue out, just to let you know how much people knew the value of an education. And that's the thing I wish that we could, I'll digress a moment, I wish we could get that across to our youngsters today, that the most important thing that you can have is an education. No one can take that from you. You have it, and you can continue to do. But let's move back to the history of our institutions. The first African-American college or university is Haney State University in Haney, Pennsylvania, founded in 1836. That is the first one. It is a state institution, but it was not founded as a state institution. It was founded as a private institution back at that time. Then after that, we had Wilberforce coming in, a few others. Then out in Jefferson City, you had Lincoln University that was started by one of the Civil War regiments, black regiments that fought out there. And then finally you come to Fisk University in 1866 was set up. Now, let's put the colleges in perspective. Now, keep in mind that at the end of the Civil War, very few African Americans could read or write. So we call these colleges, yes, but when they first started, keep in mind that they had to teach people the basics of reading and writing. So they were really elementary schools. The first three grades, 1 through 3, and then when a person finished the 3rd grade, they would go back into the community and teach others 1 to 3. And then finally we got people up through the 9th grade, and those in the 9th grade would go out and teach others. And then finally we got people through high school, and they would go back and teach. Now that's an evolutionary process that took a long time. And then finally we got into colleges and universities. Fisk University was one of the first 4-year African-American colleges in the country. And another thing that we need to understand is these universities have never been segregated. The private institutions have never been segregated. The public institutions were segregated by law in the states where they were represented. Now, if you take Fisk University, for example, we have always had non-black students here. We've had white students in our population ever since it started. Now, some people say, oh, that couldn't be in 1865 or 1875. Whites wouldn't come to Fisk. But you have to understand the dynamics of the time. We had first white missionaries who were teaching at Fisk University. They came here dedicated to help a group of people that needed education. So they came. When they came, they brought their families with them. They had children who were ready for elementary or high school or college. And keep in mind that these persons who worked at Fisk University and others of our institutions were ostracized by the city. So the people that they had the camaraderie with were those that were at the black colleges. So their children then enrolled at these institutions. So we've had white students all along. And really, we had more before the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. Since that time, that's when persons became very conscious of it, and now white students seem to be making a conscious effort not to attend these universities, not because the universities don't want them, but because they are now making the choice of going elsewhere. Now, in that same process, we have African American youngsters who are exercising the option to go to other institutions. And persons are saying, well, there's really no need for these institutions now because black youngsters can go any place. But the problem with that statement is, why do we always say black youngsters can go to white institutions? We never say that white youngsters can come to black institutions. Now, the other thing is, given where we are in education today, we need more colleges and universities, not fewer colleges and universities. If all of the youngsters who graduate from high school this May would go someplace in this country to college or university, we wouldn't have enough space for them. So instead of talking about closing our institutions, we ought to talk about making them stronger, and that's what we're all about now.
Dr. Lovett from the History Department at Tennessee State University appeared before you, Dr. Ponder, and he gave us some information relative to the shortage of black teachers in the whole system. And I know from just casually reading the newspaper that you've done quite a bit in terms of trying to deal with this as a problem, the shortage of teachers, especially black teachers. Why don't you give us some information in reference to where we stand on that as a problem today?
Well, I think what we need to understand is that it is not just a shortage of teachers in the public school system. That's what we usually think of. There's a tremendous shortage there. Let me say that right off. But we have a shortage of African American professionals at all levels of this society. In any career that you talk about, any educational discipline that you talk about, we are grossly underrepresented in terms of our percentage of the population. Now, one of the reasons for this is that somehow our youngsters have been turned off to the education system. And that's what educators today must do. We must do something about making sure that these youngsters get turned on to the system. But if we don't do something about that, just look when we come to the 21st century, in the year 2000, overwhelmingly the majority of the school-age population will be other than white. Minorities, as we call them, but I fail to see how it can be a minority when it's the majority of the population. But there will be that, Hispanics, Asian Americans, and African Americans. Now, when you get those kinds of statistics, we need more African American, Hispanics, Native Americans, and so forth, teaching in the classroom. Now, some people say, well, it really doesn't make any difference. But it does make a difference in this country. The reason it makes a difference is because color does make a difference in this country. And somehow you cannot erase all of what happened over 200 years of slavery and the years since then. People still have opinions about color. And I'm not defending it, I'm just saying that's the way it is. Now, what we need in the classroom are some persons of color so that students of color can see these persons and say, look, if he can do that or if she can do that, so can I. That's why it is so important for us to do something to make sure we get more African Americans graduating from high school, entering college and university, graduating with bachelor's degrees, and then going on to master's, PhDs, MDs, law degrees, and so forth.
Now, not only are you concerned, Dr.